Hello everybody, it is Elagatua, and I am here with something a little bit different than the usual content. Today I'm going to be doing a replay review of one of my own games that I just finished actually. And this one is just a friendly game between myself and, I'm not really sure how to say this name, but we're going to call this person Jake because they picked Jake. We decided just to have a fun kind of scrim game on Misty. And Misty was the map from round 1 of the Smacky Cup. So we won't be doing a replay review, or sorry, a map review in this video because the map review was already done as part of the Smacky Cup round 1 video. So if you want to get information about the map and the breakdown in usual Elagatua style, please refer to that other video for that. As for us, we are going to be going right into some discussion of the specific replay. And this one is interesting because I have chosen to play Grimm, and I do not think I've had any content focused around Grimm before. Not a CO that is often seen in the Global League. Kind of a meme pick, especially in the standard. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the infamous Grimm guy. But Grimm, I think, not totally gimped in Tier 4 of Fog, but also not generally seen. And so even though we don't see Grimm a lot, Grimm can be fun to play precisely because he is not often picked. And the style of game that you get with Grimm is very different than any other matchup. And so it's worth going into the details of, well, how would you play Grimm? And what is different in a Grimm game versus a standard Tier 4 matchup? And what kind of scenarios is Grimm better than in other scenarios? And when might you even want to consider picking Grimm? So let's look at the map in the context of that discussion. So Grimm has a plus 30 bonus to all attack and a minus 20 penalty to all defense. So that changes a lot of the core math. And when you're playing as Grimm, you need to understand what, I guess, mathematical thresholds this changes about the core matchup. And basically, 2 infantry, going to clear any infantry off a city, obviously, but also you're giving your opponent essentially the same benefit. So your cities are not as safe as they would be otherwise. And getting first hits with vehicles is really, really important. A first hit with a tank on a plains against an enemy tank on a plains is most commonly going to be a 9-3 trade in your favor. And what often ends up happening with Grimm is you attack with a tank into an enemy tank, and then you kind of knock that tank out, but then the enemy counterattacks with their tank and kind of kills your tank, and then you bring your reinforcement tank to attack that tank, and you kill that, and then it kind of ends up being a match of who runs out of vehicles first, or who stops reinforcing the front first, because you can't really protect the units you attack with. They kind of have one shot to get in their damage before they get counterattacked and destroyed. And so the person who can attack the longest tends to win the fight, and the person who runs out of units first will tend to lose it because they cannot punish whatever the final attack was that inflicted damage upon them. Now, one thing that separates Grimm from almost every other CO in Tier 4 is that Grimm's CO powers and superpowers have no movement bonus. And that is really the one big downside as Grimm. Grimm is very susceptible to counterattacks from all of the other tier 4 COs, because you can get maybe one good attack, but as soon as you unlock a Jake superpower or a Jess power or an Adder power or whatever, those COs are going to be able to outrange you, and the fights tend to be all about who gets the first hit, because Grimm does a lot of damage, but Grimm takes a lot of damage. So if all of Grimm's vehicles are getting hit first, he's gonna fall over and not be able to fight. But if Grimm gets a power off and is able to run into all of the other CO's vehicles, then there's a good chance that he can snowball. But he's going to be doing that without the benefit of additional movement. So if you have additional movement playing against Grimm, it's going to be easier to set that up. You can play out of range of a death ball, and importantly, you can counterattack a death ball if Grimm decides to attack into all of your vehicles and something like that. So that is the big advantage of playing against Grimm. But Grimm's CO powers have really insane bonuses to attack. Knuckle Duster is 3 bars, and that's plus 50% attack. And then the superpower is plus 80% attack. And so let's run through some important thresholds for those two powers. So a CO-powered Grimm tank with 1 comm tower, which generally you're going to have in most scenarios, can one-shot a enemy infantry in woods. It can one-shot an enemy recon on a city. And it can do, looks to be about, I think on a road, if a Grimm tank is attacking an enemy tank on a road with CO power, there is at least a roll to one-shot the enemy tank. And so oftentimes when you use your CO power as Grimm, you can do one attack with the tank, and that will bring the enemy unit low enough where you can actually finish off the enemy vehicle just by adding an infantry or 2 infantry to deal with the rest of the chip damage of that enemy vehicle. So being able to one-shot enemy units with your vehicles can make wall breaking really, really strong. And it actually makes overextending more safe. If you're trading 1 unit for 1 unit, even if that 1 unit is, relatively deep in enemy territory, you're probably not getting a bad economic trade. And in the counterattack, that is 1 more unit that your opponent is going to have to dedicate vehicles to get rid of. So oftentimes I think people neglect the importance of unit count, but Grimm can trade very efficiently in terms of unit count with his powers. And now for the superpower, there are even more crazy thresholds. Actually, before we move on to the superpower, I want to talk about Grimm Copters, because Copters have the same attack as the tank, but importantly, Grimm Copters can, with CO power, can one-shot enemy copters, and actually Grimm Copters have a unlikely chance, but they have at least a slight roll to one-shot enemy copters even without the CO power. So Grimm Copters are incredibly good, and Copters are really one of Grimm's biggest strengths compared with all the other tier 4 COs. And this is, I think, probably the most important thing to consider when trying to understand how to play as Grimm. When you're fighting into Grimm's Copters, anti-air are already going to one-shot Copters. So it doesn't matter that Grimm's Copters have terrible defense if you're fighting against anti-air, because the overkill doesn't matter, right? They're still going to die in one hit, and so the defense penalty doesn't really hurt Grimm as much against anti-air. And additionally, Copters can one-shot infantry with CO power, and against most of the other tier 4 COs that you'll be facing as Grimm, which would be Jake and Jess, the CO powers and the superpowers of those two COs do not buff the movement of those Copters. So at least when it comes to Copter fights, the movement advantage of the vehicles that the other COs have is not going to be an issue. So you're going to be kind of... Grimm's Copters are basically better than the Copters of all the other tier 4 COs, and there's no advantage for the other COs in terms of movement. So when you're playing as Grimm, you are going to benefit from leaning heavily on Copters, and Grimm is going to be good on maps that have Copters that would be good under normal circumstances. So maps with forward airports, multiple airports, which, as you can see on this map, that's exactly what we have. Another example might be something like Quota Iota, where there are 2 airports that are pretty well placed, and that's another map where you can see potentially 2 Copters a turn once the game gets sufficiently online. So that's another map that could be better than Grimm than for other maps. But in maps where you have one airport that is further behind the bases, like Settles of Still Water comes to mind, or Scavenger, maps like that, obviously Grimm is not going to be as strong, because integrating those Copters into your force and really relying on them is going to be much more difficult due to just the way that the pathing and the layout works against Grimm. Okay. So I got a little distracted there, but I do want to go over the superpower really quick, because there's some important thresholds there as well. So a superpower Grimm, the infantry of Grimm with 1 comm tower can one-shot enemy infantry on planes, which is pretty crazy. And I think, let's see, tanks. What do tanks? Tanks can one-shot enemy tanks on planes. And then that obviously means that Copters can one-shot enemy tanks on planes as well. So Grimm's superpower, there's a lot of really valuable thresholds that you can hit with the Grimm superpower, but the positioning becomes incredibly important, because you have to be the one that's getting those first strikes. You can trade 1 for 1, but then if you extend too far forward, your tanks are going to be paper thin, right? And you're going to be extending into the extended movement range of an enemy superpower potentially, and things like that. Okay. One final note that I would say about Grimm. Grimm does not really benefit so much from teching. I don't really think that Neo-tanks are super good for Grimm to build, because you don't really need the extra damage. And a Grimm medium tank with superpower is going to do 8 damage to an enemy Neo tank, and likely 7 damage with CO power to an enemy Neo tank on planes. And Copters with CO power are going to do at least 3 to an enemy Neo tank. So you can still fight against enemy tech with Grimm just by having enough Copters, because that damage bonus is so crazy. So if you're going to spend your money, I think leaning into Copters is very good. And then whenever you're leaning into Copters, it just has the passive benefit of increasing your infantry count, and having unit count advantages is oftentimes the thing that ends the game. You get enough unit count advantage, even if they're like, 1-2 HP junky units that have been beat up. Oftentimes, your opponent is going to have to send some good unit into your junky unit to clear it off, making it vulnerable to a counterattack from one of your actual good units. And you can start to trade really, really efficiently that way. And the most common situation that can happen is if you build up enough of an infantry advantage, you start capping stuff with infantry, and then your opponent has to send vehicles into your infantry, which then get counterattacked by your vehicles that are just waiting to counterattack. So that is a victory condition, and that is probably the victory condition that you want to be playing for with Grimm. So enough about Grimm and his unique playstyle. Let's talk about this replay and this game on Misty. So in this match, I made the mistake of playing as the new CO faction, Noir Eclipse. This is the first and the last time I will ever be playing as them. I really hated it. It is super difficult to see whether units have been moved already because they're black, and when a unit gets moved, it gets darker to show that it's been moved, but the units are black, so you can't really tell whether the black is the darker black. So anyway, you'll have to live with that for this replay, but we won't be seeing this again in the future. And let me turn on my vision as per tradition so that we can only see what I see, which is still a lot because we are on Misty. And so we get this spy in the corner here, which means we get to peek at this base and also this airport for as long as that recon can stay alive. We also get the free black boat on the airport. And one interesting thing about Grimm on this map is that Grimm's artillery are going to be able to clear the enemy black boat in 2 hits, but Grimm's defense nerf means that Grimm's black boat will also die in 2 hits to the enemy black boat. So some of the clearing of this airport tile will happen a little more quickly than they would otherwise. So let's get into this. We get to see some of the early play because of that spy, so we get a little more information than we would otherwise, but nothing crazy going to be happening here. I do like to send this infantry this way because this sets up a chain, and then the next infantry can just come here. There's a little kind of more aggressive cap phase things can be nice, and it's not really costing money, it's more deferring money until a future turn. So as long as it doesn't mess with any of the thresholds that we want to hit, it's basically just positional advantage for later on. Okay, and so importantly, we need to see this infantry. One thing that you can do on this map is a day 2 recon. But if you do the day 2 recon, then this infantry will not show up on this turn because this is the day 2 infantry that was built here that's going to show up at this airport. So if you don't see anything show up here on day 3, then you need to worry about a day 2 infantry, or sorry, day 2 recon. And that means you have to play a little bit more carefully in this corner because the recon's going to get there really quickly. But since we see that infantry, we know that the day 2 recon is not happening, so we can play a little bit more aggressively with these caps. And again, the reason that we have the option of a day 2 recon is because we have 2 HQs on this map, so the early game income is a little bit higher than it would be on another map. Okay, move over, see an infantry, so nothing crazy so far. And we see an artillery made, so with an artillery being made here, that means that there's a maximum of 1 recon that can be on the map. You could You can do, I think, a day 3 recon and a day 3 artillery based on the income curve. But there's not going to be any tanks out on the map for a while, so that's good to know. And that means that I can also play passively. I don't need to build an early tank to try and defend, harass up here. So I will just build my own artillery, and I have got a little money left over. I could have invested in a recon, but I don't really love recon harass as Grimm because you're kind of leaning more into the rock, paper, scissors than you would with other COs. If your recon gets caught by a tank, it's gonna get one shot pretty much no matter what tile it's on. Even if it's on a city, it's likely to die to like a tank hit plus an infantry counterattack. So I would rather just invest in more infantry to set up for a stronger cap phase on this particular map. So we see the artillery is going to move over here to take some shots at my black boat. And we see 2 infantry built. Not surprising, my opponent not going to have enough money for a tank after building an artillery, unless the tank is going to be built here. And then it would be potentially doing counter harass down there, but don't really care about that because I'm not planning on harassing in that corner anyway. So if the tank is there, it's just going to be running around looking for harassing units that won't be coming. So we're going to be doing some aggressive capture positioning. I'm going to be skipping past this city. This will make more sense next turn. But basically I can go here, here, here. And these are all like 3 moves. And this is going to set me up because I really want to get to the middle quickly. Once you capture these 2 cities, it's very hard to lose them. They're exactly in the middle of the map. And even though this city feels like it's really close to this HQ, both players can really easily get both of these if you get there first. So that's why I'm being a little bit more aggressive in my capture phase here. The sooner I get close to the middle, the sooner I can have the option of getting those. And I could even skip this guy another turn and use this lander to kind of boost to here, but we don't need to get too crazy. And I don't have any sort of counter in case there's an early recon from my opponent, because again, my opponent would have money for a day 3 recon, so there could be a recon like coming across this way. So if you go here too early and the recon shows up and starts hitting my infantry, I would have no counter plan. So don't need to get too crazy yet. So my black boat gets pinged there. That is going to be nice just because it's going to start to build up charge. And one of the interesting things on this map is that you tend to get enough charge for a CO power almost purely based on the opening interactions of having your black boat killed and then also getting some charge by hitting the opponent's black boat. And we see a recon here right away. So this is actually really nice. This infantry is well positioned. I could even try to cap this next turn. But at the very least, this recon can't actually harass anything. This infantry is going to finish the capture on the port. And then this has to be a day 3 recon as well. So it's kind of annoying that it's going to delay the cap of the city. But because this guy's in the forest, the worst it can do right now is just slow me down by 1 turn. So that's something that we can live with. And having the knowledge of the day 3 recon is very good as well, because that means that there's not going to be a tank down here for a while. And all this stuff, like this is probably the only vehicle on the map for my opponent right now, other than the artillery, right? That's hitting my black boat. So everything else should be safe. And then all these caps are totally safe as well. And we're starting to get over here. And seeing this and knowing that this can't really do that much, I think this was built last turn. Okay, so I think I probably should have talked about this at the end of the last turn, but I figure I can play a little bit greedy here, seeing that my opponent went for the early artillery, and so I'm going to clear off his recon from the comm tower first, knowing that my opponent's not really going to have enough vehicles on the map to punish me for being a little bit greedy. If your opponent doesn't go for any artillery and you go for 2, then sometimes you can get pushed off the map really hard just by not having enough vehicles. But in this situation, we're late enough that that having this second artillery is not going to be too bad. And we will be opening up access to this side of the map pretty quickly because this black boat is going to die. And now we can build a tank here and get the tank in one of these 2 forest squares next turn to defend against the recon harass. So even though the recon is blocking us out of some cities for now, it's not going to be able to stay there forever. And one nice thing about Grimm is that any sort of infantry harass that is done by our opponent with the recon, any tank counterattack is just going to one-shot the recon. So that tank should be enough to shut down any further delays of our cap phase on this top left. So black boat's dead. And so we kind of tricked our opponent by not moving that infantry in the forest, thinking that maybe there was nothing there. We can't really punish this, unfortunately, but at least we're not going to take any further damage from that. And then we see the counter artillery to take care of our recon. So this is good information. We're not at a disadvantage on the board because we went for the second artillery because our opponent has matched us, which is pretty sensible. It's not really an advantage for either player. It's just kind of the standard thing to do. One interesting tidbit about this map is because this comm tower is in the corner, and this is the only comm tower on the map, a normal matchup between normal tier 4 COs is going to be 0 tower for a while. And that oftentimes can make early aggression on this map difficult because your units are not doing a lot of damage. But because we have a Grimm in the match, it's almost as if both players are starting off with 2 towers, because pretty much any sort of engagement is going to be 2 attacks to kill anything, no matter where it is, because of Grimm's attack bonus and also defense penalty. So getting this comm tower is actually less impactful than it would be in a normal matchup. But I just like getting rid of the vision. And I hate having vision of this airport because I ideally want to invest a lot in copters later on. So I don't want my opponent to know where my copters are, where I'm building them, things like that. So definitely I'm going to just prioritize getting rid of that recon even more so than getting the tower. Just denying the vision is quite nice. And Grimm artilleries are quite good. They can, if Grimm artilleries get shots, they're pretty much one-shotting whatever they hit. So that artillery will be useful later on. All right, so we've cleared off the black boat. We're going to start capping that airport, finish our caps this turn, and now we can actually aggressively move our infantry out and start capping stuff because we have this tank to protect them. It's kind of fun because this is something that I could do as a bluff as well. Like, my opponent doesn't know if this is a tank or an infantry. So for all he knows, attacking this infantry could be safe. Now, I believe that if this recon attacks this infantry, it might die in one hit. Let's find out, shall we? So I quickly move plane or some stuff here. We got a Jake, 0 tower, but I'm on road. Looks like it's actually not. I know that nope. It would have a chance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so actually, this recon can't one-shot this. Jake would need the planes bonus in order to one-shot this infantry, but it definitely could bring this guy down to 1. So I'm kind of attempting a bait there to see if he'll kind of go for the free shot on this infantry, but obviously if he does, that recon will be dead. But if not, then no harm, no foul, because this guy can just go and start capping a city either way. So it's a win-win for me. And we're just going to get some more stuff on the map. And now that this path is open, this base is our best base to get tanks out on the board, because there's no obstructions by forests at all getting out this way, or on this side. So we want to build vehicles from this base as much as we can, unless we have the lander in position to ferry stuff over to this side. But we're doing okay up here so far. So I really just want to lock down this side and use my copters here to shut down the enemy caps in this corner. We haven't harassed that side at all, so it's likely that our opponent's got a lot of caps over there, or at least he's going to get a lot of caps over there, so we want to flip that as quickly as we can. And so the recon runs away, which is probably the best thing that the recon could have done. It's a little bit unfortunate. We don't have a way of knowing if the recon is chilling on one of these cities. We don't have a vision. We don't have a recon or anything like that of our own to spot for our tank. But we check out the middle, and then we just go for it, because if the recon is sitting on this city, then our infantry would get trapped here, and then that would allow the tank to attack it there. The recon could also be here as well, and we're just going to have to live with that, because we still need to capture this city. So if the recon's on that other city, we'll just deal with it later on. And we get a little boosty here, and next turn we're going to go for these 2 center cities and see if we can get them both. We know that that first recon is kind of up here, so it's possible that we can get away with going aggressively after the center, and we also have the potential to shift everything up this way. And now we finally cleared off that pesky recon, so we can build a T-copter secretly now that the vision is cleared, and now we'll get this infantry down to here next turn. And we have just enough income to get another tank as well, and it's always going to be from this base, because that's the base going quickly to the fighting. So we see the lander come up there, and that's kind of interesting to know. That means that this lander is probably ferrying an infantry over to this comm tower. But what that does mean is that there's not going to be a whole lot of vehicles down here, because this lander is up this way. So we're sending a lot of our vehicles this way anyway, but this is just further information that we can be strong on this side, and our opponent is not likely to be able to challenge us. After all, we've got this one tank up here, but everything else is going this way. And that infantry does get pinged, which is kind of annoying, but we will be able to counterattack that recon. And so this is one of the benefits of Grimm. Again, any sort of attack on a recon that's not a city is basically a one-shot for a Grimm tank. And we do get kind of trapped by this artillery. So it's kind of a nice setup for Jake. Sometimes it can be really frustrating when you move a tank into artillery range because it feels like, oh man, I got like outsmarted because I moved my tank where my opponent anticipated it. In this situation, it's actually not the end of the world because the tank already cleared a unit. So in terms of unit count, we're already 1 for 1 with this tank. So even if the tank dies for free, which it's likely to happen, we're losing some funds, but we're not going down a unit. And additionally, let's just watch the rest of the turn here. So we're going to get a counter harass here. And we see a lot of stuff. So we see that there's a recon and a tank here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so this recon is actually kind of in an unfortunate spot because we cleared the recon up here. We know there's a recon here. So that means that unless there's another recon out on the board, my opponent has no vision of the center. So we're going to try and take advantage of that and overload my opponent with too many caps to deal with in a really contested location. So we've got, cap here. And sure, this is in the artillery range, but we don't care. First of all, we don't think our opponent has vision of this because we just cleared the recon. And secondly, this infantry is going to be capping next turn. And this artillery has got to kill the tank. So this might be safe. And if not, it's unlikely that our opponent has like multiple infantry. We can always just retreat if we have to. But we see, like, look at all these contested caps going on. Here, here. This isn't really too contested. This is not really super contested either. But there's too many things to attack. And we can actually do this. This is like a real power move. So we just move the artillery here to cover the tank and the recon in full vision of the recon. Like, it's so terrifying to do this because it's like just saying, you can't actually do anything about this. I'm going to move my recon, or I'm going to move my artillery, and if you attack my artillery, whatever you attack it with is just going to die, and then I'm going to repair the artillery, and it's going to be bad for your unit count. So, because we have enough vision on the map that there really can't be like a second tank over in this quarter. With his artillery here, there's really likely to be another tank here because our opponent is probably not foolish and also understands that this is the best base to build tanks off of. So probably the tanks are coming this way. They're not coming here. There's the landers up here. So it's really, we're really likely to be strong here. So we don't need to have any fear. We can bully our opponent. And then we get the infantry onto the comm tower, which is nice. We also start moving this lander around. It's generally good to use this lander. You don't really need to keep it on the HQ unless you're playing against Sammy, in which case you might consider it. The lander is really good as a blocker, and if you're playing on this map, using this lander to make engagements around this area really difficult, it's a really great thing to do. Just having it in the way makes it really, really painful for your opponent to try and fight in this area. We'll see that later on. So our opponent actually has to move this infantry off of this city in order to get vision of the tank. So that's really kind of a nightmare for our opponent. And even though that tank dies, that tank basically stopped a cap and then also killed a recon. So it's not terrible at all. And we also block this infantry. So we're kind of abusing our opponent's lack of vision of the center. That's one of the benefits of killing that recon. We got away with basically taking these two center properties, and it looks like there's not going to be any counterattack because there's just no vision to set it up. We do lose our recon in the corner there, but that was certainly inevitable. And now we see our opponent totally retreat on this side. So this basically tells us everything we need to know, that our opponent is going to be focusing the vehicles over here and is retreating over here to allow us to kind of clean up this corner. So sounds good. That's kind of what we wanted. And now we've got the center cities. And again, these two cities are just very critical because once you capture them, it is so incredibly hard to lose them unless you just get absolutely steamrolled, in which case you're probably already losing the game. So we move the recon to the bottom right. It was always like there was another infantry down here, but we can remove that. And now there's nothing left over that can stop us from getting the remainder of these cities. And now our new plan is going to be eat the corner, but also we got this city. And so we kind of want to take this and also get over to this side and front shift fast enough to avoid losing this city. Now, right now, we are not strong enough to fight here. So we kind of need to play defensively in this corner for now. But we want to play defensively in range of this city so that we can deny enemy captures and just delay it until we're in position to fight. So we're going to retreat here. And again, this lander is just so annoying. Like, you want to finish off that infantry? Well, you're going to have to come next to my city if you want to fight. It's really, really obnoxious. And so now we are going to be pushing everything up. And we're going to kind of come through the center and then head towards this way. It's possible that we could get attacked in the center as well. My opponent might want to try and punish me for being greedy in those center areas, but I think it's too late for that anyway. And also, my CO power is online, so I have the option to do a knuckle duster whenever I want. And we're going to start to get these Copters spamming out. So that is what we want to do as Grimm. So looks like that infantry is going to die, which is fine. He did his job. He got that city that's going to be very heavily contested. Yeah, so that infantry is gone, but that's okay. He did great. And we are not going to get that city capped this turn, so that's really nice. We don't need to use this infantry to deny here. Not this turn, at least. We can set it up for next turn. Now we've got full vision of this side, and we can be very confident that this cap on that city is not going to be contested, and that frees us up. We want to send everything over here, and we're going to front shift. Our opponent doesn't really have good vision, so we want to ultimately take the fight kind of in this area to deny losing these cities if we can get away with it. Really good vision here. Opponent is not really going to want to come in and fight into our cities, into a artillery. Grimm is a glass cannon, and so that is why we are trying to set up as many infantry walls as possible and leave all of our vehicles behind. If Jake does try to attack into us, we do have the CO power, and we're going to have all of our vehicles in this area, and the counterattack should be really, really devastating. But we don't want to really make the first move either. And now we can really go crazy on the Copters. We don't even need anti-air. In fact, I kind of regret making this anti-air a little bit. Our best anti-air is our own Copters. So we're getting this city capped. That's not too surprising. Our opponent is basically just trying to mirror what we're doing. But the important difference is that we are doing it a little bit faster than our opponent is. And that will allow us to seize the initiative next turn. This recon has a Death Wish. We see a tank come in, so not surprising. Like, we think everything's over here, right? And we see another tank come over as well. So we know like everything's right here based on the positioning that we see here. We got really good vision, and we saw everything retreat, and we're seeing everything come over here. So we've got a pretty good idea of what's on the map. And we're going to get these 2 cities. So now we have basically both of these cities, and then we've got this city and this city, at least currently. So that's what eventually will be a 4,000 income lead, assuming the rest of the map kind of splits as it should. We don't have this corner city yet, but if we can hold on to this, this is basically a winning position. Because with a 4K income lead, we can just make more Copters than our opponent can deal with, and we should be able to win purely based off of that. So we get to snipe off the recon there. That was kind of a freebie. And again, that's the nice thing about Grimm. Recons are just absolute paper thin against Grimm, and tanks can knock them out. And even if, I was kind of expecting an artillery to be over in this area, and so I'm a little surprised to see 2 tanks here like this. And surprised, this artillery, this is actually just too far forward. You shouldn't put an artillery this far forward. You're setting yourself up for a really bad fight. And I didn't really want to burn the anti-air on this guy, but at the same time, fighting in here, this is a really good position to fight in, as long as, like, if the vehicles are kind of trading along this line here, it's going to be really, really good for me. I'm going to get the lander to be able to assist my defense. And then there's really, really good positions for artillery, like here on the HQ and here in the woods. So we can bring the artillery in there. And then look at this position. Like, there is no way that Jake is going to be able to break through and hit that artillery, because it's in the wood. So you need to actually control 2 of these tiles in order to be able to hit it. And you're not going to be able to kill this lander. So that's just free. And then we're also planning on defending this city. There's a decent chance that like 2 tanks could come in, clear this anti-air, and then have 2 tanks here hit this tank. So if that happens, then this artillery is in range to defend here. I also thought about putting it here. Could I have put it there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I could have put it here, but I was a little worried that 2 infantry could maybe be clearing me off of the HQ, and then having like a tank come in, being on the HQ and hitting my artillery would not be that great. So we decided to just play it a little bit safe. The main thing is, with Grimm, is you just don't want to get really steamrolled in the initial attack. You need to be the one with the vehicles alive to counterpunch with. Sometimes you can make the mistake of thinking that Grimm is kind of a really brawly CO, and that can be the case, but where Grimm is best is with the counterpunch, or especially with the first punch with the vehicles. So every vehicle that you can preserve to have that stronger counterpunch it's going to be that much easier to set up the snowball. And once Grimm is snowballing, it's really, really hard to slow him down, either in income or in unit count. And look at all this infantry. We've almost nothing down here, which is perfect. We got our objectives, and then we've shifted everything up this way at the right time Now the fight is happening up here, and we know that even though our opponent has everything kind of up here as well, we also have pretty much everything up here. And positionally, this is better for us. So if we just kind of, butt heads with everything, then eventually our income lead should allow us to build more units, and the Copters should be able to carry us to victory. So again, leaning very heavily into the Copters, just making Copter from this airport so that we can get to the fight very quickly. So we're seeing lots of tanks here. This is exactly what we expected to see. And that's really nice. A Copter into an infantry. That's what you want to see. You want to see Grimm infantry absorbing hits from the expensive vehicles, because then they're in position to get the counterattack off. All right, so now if we look at the CO meter, so we're almost at a super. And so it's decision time for us. Pretty much no matter what we do, we know that we're going to give Jake enough power for the super power in the counterattack. So we got to be a little bit careful about setting this turn up, because we know that Jake is going to get a lot of movement on the vehicles for the counterpunch to whatever we do here. That being said, if we fight well here, the counter to the counterpunch could be pretty strong as well, because it does seem like we have a tremendous advantage in just the sheer number of infantry here. And so if well positioned, these infantry can absorb a lot of attacks that would be more efficient going into our vehicles. That is nice. The artillery here can just one-shot this tank, and that's going to give us enough CO charge for the super if we want it. But actually, in this situation, the superpower does not really give us much extra. The CO power is already enough for our Copters to at least one-shot Jake's Copter, and there's a decent chance that we will either kill the tanks with our tank shots or be able to finish them off with infantry. So first of all, we take the freebie. This Copter had chip damage on it already, so we knew that we didn't even need to power yet. And I was curious. I wanted to get some vision before I committed to the CO power either way. And so now we're going to go with the Knuckle Duster. So this is the CO power. And again, Knuckle Duster tank can one-shot a recon on a city. This tank is going to die for sure. We know it's going to die, but it's trading 1 for 1 in terms of unit count, and that's pretty good. And then that also, it gives us some vision, and then it's going to give this recon actually a target, but not quite yet. So unfortunately, we don't get the roll here to kill this in one shot, but if we can get another infantry attack on that, that's likely to die. But it would have to come from this square, so we need to kill that tank if we want to have a chance. Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't get this roll. I don't know exactly what the stats of the roll are, but that is kind of the trade-off we were making of going with the Knuckle Duster instead of the superpower. So we're not going to get to wall this off. If we had gone with the super, we could have had infantry in these 2 tiles, and then that would have made a lot of these units more safe against the counterattack. But by going with the CO power, we set ourselves up for a roll where we can still get it, but we just didn't roll well enough. So it's okay. This is still a pretty good situation because this artillery is still covering this Copter. So even if the Copter dies, this Copter is going to be covered by this Copter if Jake uses a Copter to attack this. And if it's an anti-air, then it's covered by the artillery. So it's just, again, very favorable position, and that matters a lot. We get a free infantry here. Obviously, this recon is completely suicidal, but we're trading even on unit count, and this is one more thing that is going to eat a vehicle hit from our opponent on the superpower. And now our infantry wall is going to be very effective, because we just have way more infantry on this side than our opponent does. And so we can just kind of block everything. So you see here, like, look at all this stuff. And then this is a little bit juicy, but you know, the artillery is covering everything. And our opponent has to really attack into our artillery in order to get at the units that he really wants to. And these guys are, they're taking one for the team, unfortunately. But as long as it's only them, long term, likely to work out well. And we've got everything in the fight. There's nothing down here. So it's just good strategy overall. We knew that there was going to be a fight over here. We set it up, and now we are executing it as best we can. And we want to be out of here because we are not going to want to take a fight in that corner. So we just try to save as much as we can. After all, we got what we wanted. We got that city. So now we're in a position to delay enemy caps of that city in the future. And yeah, we are really well set up in this area here to counterattack whatever is left over after the superpower. And it's time for Jake to throw all of what he has left at us. And we're building a medium tank here. So if this fight should continue for much longer, we can get the medium tank over to here pretty quickly, and it'll be in the fight. Although, based on what I see with this recon, I think we're probably too strong for our opponent to clear us out there, but we'll see what he can do now, because it's block rock time. So Copter gets smashed. Recon hits us there. Planes bonus on that recon, so goodbye, my friend. And it is pretty crazy. So Jake's superpower on the planes can one-shot Grimm infantry. But it's a good thing that we built up a pretty substantial infantry advantage at this point, because otherwise those would be some really efficient trades. There's just not enough infantry. And his little nice snipe on the wounded infantry there. And fortunately, we lose that infantry in the bottom right corner, but at the same time, that tank is not fighting our death ball. So we will take that, no problem. That's completely acceptable for us. And now it's back on our turn. And so this is why saving the CO power and not going for the superpower is so valuable. Now our bar is at 2,700 or 27,000 out of 32,400. So now we can get another CO power this turn pretty easily. And the CO power this turn makes the math amazing for us, because with the CO power, we're still going to be one-shotting the Copters, and our artillery are going to be able to one-shot the anti-air, and our tanks and Copters will be able to one-shot infantry. It makes the math just so much easier. We can even fight into this corner here. We'd love to remove this recon just to slow down this push. Even if it's a little bit inefficient for us, removing the recon kind of makes it very scary to continue pushing on that side, because you don't have vision, so you don't know what you're pushing into. Anyway, we just want to get vision up there. And this is just all about trying to fight as efficiently as possible. We're trying to get enough charge as efficiently as possible to get that CO power. And so we have to do a little bit of infantry fighting, and finally we got enough for the Knuckle Duster, and so now we can finally commit in with the Copter to one-shot, artillery one-shot there. Never lucky. That's like an insane roll to lose, by the way. Like, what was that roll? That was a ridiculous one. It was so infantry against 1 HP tank on a city with CO power. Yeah, that is 7% to 15% attack. So that's, I don't know the exact math because I don't know what the full chip damage was from the previous turn, but it's I think 90+% in my favor to kill that we missed there, but it's okay. Because we would have probably liked to have, I don't know. It's not that impactful, but anyway, so we clear off the artillery there in the top left. That gets us some good value for our 4 HP tank. And we got good vision here, and fortunately we're safe from the artillery. We're just a little bit out of range. We know that there's a tank in this forest, but that's okay. Our job here, we don't need to like win the fight immediately. We just need to damage the infantry enough that we can slow down this side enough to stall it out, and then eventually we can send a bunch of copters over there because we've got more money than our opponent does. All right, so this position is pretty nice. Again, we are starting to run out of tanks. This guy is obviously going to get killed, but we do have these guys that are really the core of my army, and they're pretty far back. We do this medium tank that's going to come and steamroll stuff when he shows up, if the game continues any further. But really, the main thing that is decisive is this infantry ball, because this infantry ball can continue to push towards this corner, and there's really nothing that can stop it, even though we need to ultimately retreat from here. And then we're not at any risk of losing these cities, even if all this stuff gets cleaned up or damaged pretty heavily. This infantry can deny this cap and reset that, and then we've got tanks that can come and divert this way. So things are looking pretty good. And then this ends up being the end of the game. I think this is a fair resign. So pretty even in terms of kind of the damage done. But if we look at the funds, you know, I'm already up essentially like a full turn worth of funds, and it's going to be pretty much 4K in my favor for the rest of the game. If we take off the fog now, we can see that there's basically nothing to contest the copters, and that's really the fatal issue here, is that there's nothing to contest the copters. And so as the game continues on, I can just invest more money in copters because I have the income lead, and there's not really much that Jake can do about it. We also have the infantry advantage down here eventually. All these guys are wounded, so we're never really at risk of losing these cities. Even if we take slightly inefficient trades, we can... well, Jake's going to run out of infantry before I run out of vehicles to contest with. So yeah, I think that is pretty much the game. We'll run through this in full vision as per tradition, although because we had the spy in the early game, we saw a lot of what was happening here. We had the day 3 recon come across, and there's a lot of stuff over here in this corner, but it is not enough to contest a tank chain. So we got beat up in this corner a little bit, but it was just a little bit too late to prevent all these caps from going off. And once the caps are off, I can just play defense and hold on to those cities, even against the the full power of my opponent. But I think the most critical thing was, so day 11, we're already starting to shift everything this way in preparation to take a fight up there, so that day 12, so day 12 happens. I'm already in pretty good position with my entire death ball to fight over here, because I anticipated that this is where my opponent's strong, this is where my opponent wants to fight, and we can deny the city to force a fight there, and then we're fighting in, again, this area, which is a very happy place for me to fight, because we get the value out of the lander. And from that, it's just a matter of using our powers wisely and taking a good fight. And that's really decisive. You can see even though we're not super far ahead in the unit count, or sorry, in the unit value, we've built a pretty substantial unit count lead. A lot of this is just because I've built a lot of Copters. And we get smacked pretty bad here, but then this next turn, you can see it's pretty decisive. We're up 12 units and a pretty solid net worth lead. So from there, things are going to continue to spiral. All right, that's the replay. Again, this is just kind of a friendly game, so nothing really at stake here. Is not a global league game or anything like that, but we got to show off Grimm, so I hope you enjoyed that. Something a little bit different than the usual game. But that's going to be it for me today. I've got some stuff coming up in the future. We're going to do the Smacky Cup round 4 replay review, which it won't really be one of my games, because unfortunately that game didn't really take place. And then round 5 of the Smacky Cup, that's going to be over. I mean, who knows? My opponent's kind of dragging it out, but I think the result is not really in doubt at this point. So that'll be coming whenever the game resolves. But I'll be on a trip for at least a little bit shortly, so don't expect too much for the next month, but hopefully we'll get back on track after that. So with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon or evening wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. Peace.